All right, here we are ready for our first video lesson on animal behavior, chapter 51 in your textbook. As a reminder, I do talk very fast, so if you want to pause this at any time or you need to look back over it, please do so. Ethology is the name for animal behavior, the study of animal behavior, and it's really about understanding not only the relationships between organisms, but how that relates to survival and evolution. As you begin your Cornell notes, you should have today's date, not this date, but today's date. Make that line down your paper that we were talking about and begin writing out the notes just as we have in the slides. So, what is behavior all about? First of all, anything that an animal does and how it reacts to things is its behavior. It is in response to a stimuli. The stimuli could be internal or external. And it's always about three things. It's either trying to find food, find a mate, or keep itself alive. Maybe prevent it from being attacked or some sort of disease. There are multiple types of behavior. Innate means instinct. So innate are those things that you are born with. They are automatic behaviors and they are consistent behaviors, which means that they will repeat themselves automatically due to your genes. The other type of behavior is learned. So we will spend time on what were you born with the ability to do and what things have you learned to do. So the actual ability to learn is innate, but to actually vary your response is a learned behavior. Why would we even study behavior in the first part? It tells us a lot about evolution and how things are related, and even links us back to what genes cause those behaviors. It's part of our phenotype, the expression of our genes. Tells us a lot about natural selection, which should make you think about survival of the fittest. Who is most adept and how do those behaviors lead to success? If you check in with your Cornell notes, I have my ethology and my definition. I have behavior and what it means. I have innate and learned behavior. So I have my A, 1, and 2 following here. All right, when we ask questions, there are two types of questions. First is proximate. Proximate really refers to the biology behind it, the how does that happen. So how does a bird like a woodpecker peck? And it's talking about the actual beak and the movement and what occurs. The other type of question is called an ultimate question. Ultimate leads us to why does it behave in that way? What is the woodpecker trying to do? Is it trying to get food? Is it trying to attract a mate? Is it trying to signal to another? So proximate questions answer the how and what, and ultimate answer the why. Again, checking in your Cornell notes, make sure you list those right out. We will deal with plenty of scientists as we go. These pictures are from your textbook, and you should definitely add the scientists to the information as we go through. All right, so first we want to talk about instinct. A pattern of behavior that is instinctual is called a fixed action pattern, or an FAP. You cannot change or prevent or stop a fixed action pattern. Once the animal begins that response, it will continue it to completion, and it does it automatically. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Yawning. If I sit here and go, and yawn right now, chances are you are going to start yawning because you watched me yawn. It is instinctual, and you can't stop a yawn mid-yawn, even when you try. You have to go all the way to completion. Another great example is in your book. This is a stickleback fish, and this is a male. You can tell because it has a red belly, and you'll notice the stickles on its back. There is a pattern of behavior that they do that is an aggressive behavior. When another fish enters their territory, they become very agonistic, and they attack the other male. The sign stimulus is the thing that notices and triggers the response, so every fixed action pattern has a sign stimulus. The sign stimulus for the male fish is the red belly. So Nico Tinbergen, this scientist, decided to do some interesting experiments and say, hey, what if it's not a male fish? What if I just put a red belly on a piece of wood? So he took all these different blocks. I think I have them in one of these pictures. Here we go. He took these different blocks and he painted the bottom of them red. And he would put them in this a very large tank where he had his male stickleback fish, and irregardless of the model he put in, as long as it had a red underside, the male fish would attack it. So it definitely was a fixed action pattern, and the sign stimulus is that red belly. All right, you can add some more of these examples right out of your book into your Cornell notes. So again, we have our notes going down the right side of our page, adding in all of our information, and over here where you left the space on the left, that's where I want you reading chapter 51, the parts that correspond, and adding in more examples, maybe some diagrams, things that will chunk the information and help you remember it better. All right, next thing. There are two types of movement that are also instinctual. The first is called taxis. A taxis is towards or away from something. So the perfect example, I think, is a bug. A bug moves towards dark and away from light. So we could call that phototaxis, a movement in response to light. Another example is chemotaxis. They might go towards a really great smell or away from a really bad smell. In the case of bugs, they're probably going to go towards a really bad smell. So each organism might have a positive, meaning going towards it, or a negative, going away from it. The other type of instinctual movement is called kinesis. Kinesis is a change in pace, but not necessarily a change in direction. So when a bug is simply moving to find moisture and it starts moving faster and faster because it knows its chances of survival are greatly decreasing if they don't find moisture, that is kinesis. All right, let's move along here. There are other instinctual behaviors that I don't spend a lot of time on, but migration is an excellent one that you could study more. It has a lot to do with magnetic fields, they believe, and that magnetic fields actually help draw organisms at certain times of year to certain areas. There's some really great research done on butterflies and why they return to certain places as well. All right, when something is instinctual, there is often a critical time period that it needs to develop during. So imprinting is an example of something that requires a very specific time frame. We call that a critical period. This is Konrad Lorenz. He did a lot of work with geese, and what he would do is he would be there right at the moment when the geese broke the shell and hatched. And when they would hatch, the first moving object they saw was him instead of the mother goose. So when they saw him, they believed, wow, this is my mother, and they would follow him around. So all these pictures, and you'll see a goofy one in your book of him in the water and all the geese behind him, they would imprint on him, believe that that was their parent, and follow it. It has to happen during that critical time. So again, critical time period, this is another example that you could add in your Cornell notes. You could read about it in the book. Songs of birds and songs of insects might have critical time periods within which they must learn their species song in order to later be able to find a mate. All right, again, if we check our Cornell notes, I'm writing in each of these things as we go on the right-hand side. All right, learned behavior. This is the part that I think you'll find so interesting. The things that we learn, we associate. So there are two types of associative learning. The first is called operant conditioning. That's trial and error. Everybody learns by trial and error. You try something, if you get a great response, you do it again. If you try something and you get a slap on the hand, you're not going to repeat it. So our scientist here for operant conditioning is Skinner. Skinner did an experiment with rats, and he had a little box. And so it's called Skinner's box. And he would put the rats in, and there are little levers. And when they hit a certain lever, food comes out. Of course they love it. They're going to hit the lever over and over and over. And they were learning to associate, when I hit this lever, I get food. So of course, hit the lever, get more food. Hit the lever, get more food. Well, there was a different lever that when they hit that, it would shock them. So very quickly the rats learned, don't touch that lever, it's going to cause a shock. So that is all an example of operant conditioning. The second type of conditioning, another associative learning pattern, is classical conditioning. And that is the example of Pavlov's dogs. And I'm sure you've probably heard this one before. It's when you learn to associate a neutral stimulus. So it is not something that you do. It is a neutral stimulus with either something positive or something negative. I'll give this example. In the classroom right there, there is a speaker. If all of a sudden I heard a click, I would immediately look up there. Because what am I expecting? Someone to talk. Someone's going to come over the PA. I have learned to associate that neutral stimulus with a response. It's going to be a voice coming through the speaker. Pavlov's dogs learned to associate the ringing of a bell with him giving food. So he would ring a bell, give them their food. Ring a bell, give them their food. Eventually, the dogs would hear the bell and start salivating, drooling, because they knew they had associated the ring of the bell with that reward of food. So here's an example. This shows Skinner's box. These pictures, again, you can find in your book. And my little dog here with the will drool for food. And the stimulus response. All right, next type, habituation. Habituation, we did talk about with the article that you read on how urban animals, their behaviors, and even their brains' cognitive weight might be changing. Habituation is when you learn to ignore meaningless stimuli. So if something is not going to help you or harm you, you learn to ignore it. I gave you the examples the other day of baby birds in the nest, and when the leaves fall down, the initial time that it happened, they startled, very scared. But then they learned, oh wow, this is just a leaf, it's not hurting me, it's not helping me, I'm just not going to even respond to it anymore. Or I gave you the example if you were sitting home in bed and it's a quiet, really dark night and you're home alone and the storm picks up and hits some branches against the window. First time that happens, chances are you're going to jump off the couch and scream and yell, and then you realize, oh, it was just a branch, I'm not in danger, and as it happens more and more, you startle less until you just learn to ignore meaningless stimuli. All right, problem solving. This is our last level of learning, which you can only see in higher level animals. Being able to problem solve and use tools is something that we see in phyla that are much more advanced. Chimpanzees, watching another chimpanzee, learning through that following technique. All right, I'm going to end this video and just remind you that please go back within 24 hours, review and read Chapter 51, add to the left column your Cornell notes, circle information, put asterisks, put stars, write down questions of things that you know you would like me to go over in class. The more you do the Cornell note method, the more you're going to remember and retain, because remember that repetition is how you are going to be able to achieve higher levels.